some of the,
it's just setting up the link between Zoom and YouTube. So
perfect.
I think a few more seconds and then we would be live.
No problem. Some of the best podcasts I've listened to in my life essentially feel like you're overhearing a conversation between friends, right? The worst podcasts are ones that feel like someone's broadcasting some message to you, right?
Yeah.
So I've always found, be it panel discussions, firesides, interviews, podcasts, the best ones are ones that, to be honest, feel like a normal, natural conversation. So I hope that's what we do today.
Absolutely. So we are live now, Vinod, and hello everyone. Thanks a lot for tuning in. And as even before I get into the details, I was just having a brief conversation with Vinod before we jumped into the YouTube live. And you must have actually overheard the fag end of the conversation where Vinod said some of the best discussions are those which are actually a discussion and not a monologue. So the first thing I want to really spell out is that's what we want to do. Think of it like a video AMA, ask me anything with Vinod, right? And it is more of a discussion where each one of you who's basically participating in the event today is actually actively participating. The second thing, as Vinod told me before we went live, was you know uh, every advice has to be understood in a certain context, and every advice has a certain meaning to it. So not everything that people say should be written in stone. And that's something I tell people who come to me also for advice. I tell them that take whatever I'm saying not with a pinch but a pound of salt. I have been wrong many times in my life. So those are two things I thought I should actually spell out explicitly as caveats before we jump into the discussion. Okay, guys, quick round of intros. I am Srinivasan Narayan. I am the co-founder and CEO of Good Meetings. Good Meetings is an online, AI-driven video platform that helps sales guys sell 10x better on video. We give you demo analytics. So think of us like Gong, but for live video calls. And I just wanted to spend a minute talking about Road to SaaS, the initiative that we have launched and why we launched it, right? Last year, when I actually started building my B2B, our B2B SaaS company, I realized very early that we had global ambitions, like most B2B SaaS founders in India. But the moment I stepped out of India and I started exploring markets beyond India, especially the US, I realized the massive difference that is there, especially in selling a product in those markets versus selling the product in India, right? The playbooks that we had formed for India, after working really hard, we realized most of that would not work in another market, especially a Western market like the US. So it took me a lot of time to really come to grips with the fact and change our playbooks to build a global product. And when I actually came back to India after making multiple trips, I realized that there were a lot of B2B SaaS founders like me who would meet me and ask me, how did you do this? How did you sell into the US? And while I was still learning, I realized that this was a common pain point across all B2B SaaS founders. What I also realized that we discussed this in a very latent fashion in informal discussions, but it's a big pain point. More importantly, there are veterans who basically have amazing knowledge about this, but that knowledge exists in nooks and corners, and it is basically constituted as tribal knowledge today. Our whole initiative with the Road to SaaS series is to ensure that such knowledge gets democratized, and each one of us basically kind of learns faster, learns from the best, and we are able to kind of scale our company much better, much faster. So that's the objective of Road to SaaS. And the first speaker we have today is someone who's very special to me, and I'll tell you why. I made multiple trips to the US to really understand the US markets well and to see how we could set up a GTM motion for Good Meetings. And every time I would actually, kind of tell someone in India that I was going to the US, he or she would tell me, hey, you're going to the US, B2B SaaS founder, make sure you meet Vinod, right? It happened so many times that when I finally ended up meeting Vinod in an event, it became more like a pilgrimage, right? And I'm sorry, Vinod, it's a small fanboy moment for me. And I must tell you that since then I've had multiple discussions with Vinod. Vinod has become a great mentor and friend and guide to us. And every time I meet him, I walk back with more insights, a little bit more illuminated. And that's why when the whole Road to SaaS series was started, if and I was thinking about people whom I should bring in, without an iota of doubt, I knew that Vinod would be the right person, right? And I just want to ensure that in this ensuing 1 hour, whatever I have experienced, you guys also experience, and I also get to learn more from Vinod. He's an amazing speaker and an amazing extempore guy. One of the big reasons why we decided to do this as a live event and not as a recorded event. Uh, and just to complete his introduction, Vinod is a successful entrepreneur in the B2B SaaS space. He built a really popular company, one of the beacons as far as B2B SaaS products built in India and sold in the US are concerned. The company was called Cloudcherry. It was a customer experience management platform, a top platform in that, and it disrupted the way companies used to listen into the voice of customers. That company was acquired by Cisco, and post that, Vinod has been a senior vice president at Unifor and dons various hats, including helping B2B SaaS founders like us out. So welcome, Vinod, to this discussion.
Thanks. No pressure, right? I do appreciate the introduction, and I hope the content we have for you justifies the hype that's been built up. So let's do this.
I can assure the people about that. Vinod, let's get started from the very beginning. Uh, I and the people here would like to know your, superhero origin story. What made you, get attracted to B2B SaaS? What made you get attracted to this domain? And how did, your whole Cloudcherry experience come about?
No, absolutely. So I don't know if many of you know, but I actually started my career in the Merchant Navy. So from 1997 to 2006, I was on ships across the world. Today ships have internet, but at that point in time, we didn't, right? So the ship had one email ID, which downloaded emails once a day. There was obviously no Wi-Fi. We had no access to the internet. And every time the ship went into port, you went into an internet cafe to essentially open your email and stuff like that. So it was a very different world, which means when I went away for 6 or 9 or whatever months I went away for, my world stopped and you had no idea what was going on in the rest of the world. So that is the world I was in till 2006, when a very close friend of mine who had started his startup gave me the chance to join his startup. And I asked him, what do you want me to do? He says, business strategy. So I had no idea. I said, okay, I have 3 months of leave. Let me give that a shot. And if it doesn't work out, we'll shake hands, we'll still remain friends, and I'll go back to ship. And that's how I actually got into the world of SaaS. I didn't know SaaS existed. I didn't know what it was. But very quickly, we discovered that we were powering mobile stock trading for large brokerages. And our first customer actually was TD Ameritrade in the US. And without disclosing exact details, we actually ended up striking a deal where we powered the entire mobile stock trading infrastructure. And every time someone placed a trade on the mobile, we got paid a certain dollar number. So we said, this makes perfect sense. If nobody trades, don't pay us. If people trade, pay us. Let's link directly to value. The more value we deliver, the more you pay us. And much later, we discovered that's what you call SaaS. But but day one, it essentially was first principles. And we said any product that aligns itself to absolute delivery of value. This was very clear. They made $10 to $15 every time someone placed a trade. And to get a certain number out of that just seemed like a logical way to do business. And that was my initiation into SaaS. We discovered the acronym much, much, much later. The other interesting fact was, I think Amazon AWS did its beta in 2006 sometime. We were one of the early launch partners. We were on the only world of software I know is where it's hosted on the cloud, it's public cloud, it's multi-tenant. So when I witnessed my first on-prem deployment years and years and years later, it took me like a couple of weeks to figure out what this thing is. So in terms of technology and architecture that powers SaaS, in terms of the commercial model that powers SaaS, in terms of the revenue models that make sense when you sell SaaS, the marketing of it, the messaging of it, the value delivery, I actually know no other world than the world of SaaS. And that's really my initiation into this world.
Awesome. This is a new nugget of information for me. And this is very interesting. Vinod, moving on, you did talk about, how you had one customer in the US, stockbroking firm and stuff. Uh, but, was that your first customer? And, how did you get your first 1 to 5 customers? Because we've had users like Abhishek Ballab and others who've asked, how do I get my first 5 customers, right? Uh, so if you started selling globally from day one, how did you get your first 5 customers, right? And has that been the same throughout, or have you seen a sea change in how SaaS companies get their first 5 global customers? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, as you said something before the show started, and I want to make sure that we say that again. The greatest founder trait is what advice not to take, right? The worst thing you can do is to take whatever I'm saying and try to absolutely apply to that, to your world, to your product, to your industry, right? So just take everything with a pinch of salt. So if you really look at, if you listen to how Slack started or LinkedIn started or any of these products started, you'll essentially hear one very common refrain. And that is why people say the Bay Area is amazing or the tech network is amazing. They'd say, hey, I started this, so I reached out to all my friends who work in all of these tech companies and I said, hey, I got something super cool. Why don't you try it out, right? But the message you want to take away is not that you need friends. The message you want to take away is that over optimizing for this beautiful funnel building, inbound driven, blah, 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 before you've got product market fit is actually chasing the wrong goalpost, right? Your first 5 customers can come anyway. They could be your neighbors, they could be your friends, they could be your ex-colleagues, it could be something you optimize for SEO, it could be anything, right? And the point really is, how do you get an early segment of users that define your ideal customer profile? Because when you build a product, surely you built for a certain pain, right? You built for saying, hey, revenue leaders have this problem. They don't know how to forecast their funnel. So I'm solving for that problem. So you know that the person you're solving for is the VP of sales or head of sales or CRO or whatever, right? So that is more important. So much that at Unifor, I'm building a stealth project. And what we've done is we've actually bought 8 to 10 of our ideal customers in the room, even before we wrote the first line of code. And that is super important. It is never too early to have your customers in the room. If you come from the industry and you have a strong hunch, your first 5 customers literally could be network. It could be any of those things, right? The point is, how do you get a representative sample large enough, which allows you to make sure that you're headed towards the right product market fit? Because even if you're from the industry and you felt the pain, the product you built is not guaranteed a product market fit. So my advice would be very, very simple. Your first 5 customers literally is the easiest way you can get in front of 5 people who look like your ICP, who validate the pain point that you're articulating, have general agreement with the direction you're pointing to in terms of this, does this look like a good solution, and are willing to commit some time and effort with a product that's not entirely market ready, right? Because if you're going to wait for market readiness, you're probably launching a little late, right? So that's what I would say. The only caveat I would add to it, and we can discuss that in subsequent minutes of this conversation, is please seek your early customers in the market you hope is your market for life. What I mean by that is, when we say product market fit, there's a product constituent to it, there's a market constituent to it, right? So if you go for comfort, which is, let me go for my first 5 customers where I live, let's say you live in India, but your real market is the United States, then what will happen is you'll either be encumbered with a lot of deliveries that are pending here, or you'll optimize your product for the realities of this market, right? And when you really want to transition to the market you want to grow in, there's an entire relearning process. I actually have a radical opinion which says product market fit has to be rediscovered per market, especially for enterprise software. Now, if you're doing SMB, that might not be the case, right? Where everything is inbound, it's online, everyone's looking for the same thing. Again, there may be a lot of nuances with market, but in enterprise, your product market fit is per market. That's the reason why a lot of US-based startups never leave the US, or leave the US after 10 or 15 years. One, because there's great market depth. And two, they realize that just launching in the UK or Europe is not like, flicking open another state. It is an entirely new market, entirely new product market fit. So that's really my thought. It might not sound helpful, but the message for you is, don't get too caught in a formula to get the first 5 customers. Any way you can find 5 is a good way to get them.
Got it. I just want to add to that. In fact, I have learned the hard way that the way you said for enterprise products, it's probably not product market fit, it's market product fit. The market comes first, right? You decide what market you want to, be in for life, and then you start, selling your product there, right? But that actually, feeds into the next question that I had, which a lot of our users also asked. How do you decide, right, that hey, US is the right market for me, or India is the right market for me, or UK is the right market for me? One is, obviously anecdotal data, the market is massive, so you throw darts and it will stick kind of a thing. Or do you actually think that there is a deeper way to go about deciding which is the first big market you want to target?
No, no, I'm really glad you asked this question. So I think the one mistake you should not make is to build a product and say the US is the largest market, so let's just go to the US, right? That problem may already be solved for in the US, or that problem may not exist in the US, right? So for example, let's say AR is a big issue in India. Maybe it's not as big an issue in the US, right? So if you're solving for that problem, you probably want to see if the market feels the pain or has it been solved for effectively enough and so on and so forth. That said, let's assume you were blind to all of these things. You want to try your hand at the largest possible market that exists for your product. And let's assume you're building a horizontal or a product that is equally applicable in India and the US and in Europe. Let's put it that way. Then you obviously want to go to the largest market. Why? 60% I think of enterprise software gets consumed in the US, right? You could be based in a particular state in the US and choose to only do business locally, and yet you can build your first few million of ARR, right? So that's the depth of that market. I remember when we went there, our first customer was an inbound customer, and I moved to the US on the back of one US customer, which was a credit union in Arizona, who I just looked up just now. They're like $8 billion of assets under management, right? That's a very, very large size. And I'd never heard of them, and I'm sure you wouldn't have heard of them if I just call out the name. And that is the depth of that market. And obviously the size of the market, which is how many such people exist. So in India, for example, when we looked at banking, we could not look beyond 15 or 20 banks, right, in terms of who we could go to, because we want to sell enterprise at a certain price point. In the US, there are about 7, 8, depending on how you count it, 7 or 8,000 credit unions, out of which at least 1,000, 1,500 are of a size where you can call them a significant bank, right? And you can sell to them at enterprise price points. So really, that's how you think of your market. Unless you're very, very constrained by regulation or local whatever, you do try to go for the largest market you can. And hence you seek your product market fit or market product fit in the market that you want to be in. The biggest mistake you can make, even though you can post facto rationalize by saying, I spent time in India, it taught me how to do service, it taught me scale, blah, blah, blah. That is a post facto rationalization. If you want to essentially build a US based business, you start with the US, not fiddle your way around to that.
Got it. We have a question coming in from Karan. He asks, how do you reach the decision makers in enterprises?
Okay, so it depends on which organizations you want to go after, right? So if you're a startup which is pre-product market fit, and you don't have the network that you seek, right? So today, as I said, at Unifo, I'm building a stealth product, and what we've done is we've bought together what 8 or 10 large BPOs, system integrators, and very large enterprise customers in the room before I started building my product, right? That's because we already have the network, right? Let's assume you don't. Remember that uber large enterprises make their buying decisions very differently from mid-market or otherwise, right? So for example, if you're a product for CMOs and you want to go to the CMO of a Fortune 50 company, know that it'll be super hard for you to immediately gain traction, right? So I would first try to reach to a target audience where decision making is still more, let's say, decentralized, right? Everything doesn't go through procurement, because here's the thing. The first thing for me, I'm assuming the audience here is mostly pre-product market fit startups, right? So let's assume 1 million ARR or zero revenue, pre-product market fit. So know that that's the audience I'm passing this message to, and you're going after enterprise, right? Large companies take all their buys through procurement, right? And the moment you come to procurement, you get questions like past implementations, money in the bank, sustainability. Then someone will ask you for a code escrow, right? And that's not something you can optimize for when you're that early, right? So instead, I would focus on mid-market or smaller teams in large enterprises which can adopt your product. And one thing I learned, I went on Twitter and LinkedIn in 2008. At least for Twitter, it was very early days, right? And what I always did was, there's one thing that never goes out of fashion. If you want to appeal to Srinivasan, you essentially have to write to him in a way that he will respond. Because the one thing that never goes out of fashion, no matter how much technology you throw, is you're trying to get these people one-on-one. And when you cold outreach somebody, there is nothing more powerful than the founder mailing and saying, hey, I read this, or I know this is happening with your business. I felt that pain. I felt it strongly enough to commit my entire life to solving that problem, right? I would love 15 minutes of your time to tell you how I'm doing it, right? The difference here is the tailored outreach is from the heart. It tells you that I've bet my entire life in solving the problem I believe you face. And I need 15 minutes, no commitments of your time, just to tell you how I'm solving for this problem. So you'll realize that the founder is the most important SDR of the company early on. And the best way to reach out these people in 2 or 3 ways. No matter how you reach out, the outreach has to be intensely personalized. The second way is through network. LinkedIn is brilliant. So if you know me well enough and you want to reach out to Srinivasan, and then you can say, look, he's in your network. Can you please make a warm introduction? Warm introductions make a very, very, very big difference. The one way that I've found doesn't work, funny enough, is top down. So if you find a way to connect with the CEO of a Fortune 100 company and somehow get them, hey, can you tell the VP of customer success on your team to try me out? There's actually insane amount of resistance to that push, wherein, hey, there is this company, they themselves feel sheepish. So the one thing that I've seen not work is actually top down, funny enough. I'm not saying don't try it, but a warm introduction from somebody, right? Or a direct outreach that is highly uber personalized. I found those to work. I'll give you a simple anecdote. I reached out once to the CMO of Aditya Birla Fashion. Absolutely love him. And I mailed him and said, hey, looks like you've got customer experience technology in your stores. We are doing the same for Titan, who's a peer of yours. I know you're already deployed and you're well covered, but I'd love to meet you to trade notes and see what you've learned around customer experience that we are also learning at your peers. And the email was responded to in 15 minutes. And it was because I was not selling, right? It was two peers trying to come in and discuss what we're learning in customer experience. So there is never a bad time for a highly personalized outreach. And you have to read it to the way it should sound is that I think this person knows me. Like I don't remember his or her name, but it looks like this person knows me, or where did I meet them before? Because this looks like the continuation of a past conversation. That's the filter you want to put your communications through.
Makes sense. So in summary, a very personalized outbound email. B, go through warm connects. C, not top-down approach may or may not work. And I think D is don't act like a salesman. Act like someone who's basically, kind of coming to seek guidance, or someone who's basically coming to exchange notes, right? And a transaction can be a byproduct of that bunch of discussions.
Someone once asked me which is the greatest sales hack ever, and I said it was authenticity. When someone believes that you're authentic and you believe in the problem and you believe genuinely that what I'm offering you is the right solution, that conviction, which is only driven by authenticity, right? Everything else, which is persistence, this, that, is a byproduct of authenticity. So long as the persistence is authentic, then the person on the other side believes that you're being sold to for the right reasons. I'll tell you another anecdote in the end if you have time, which will tell you how important authenticity is, but nothing is more important than that.
Makes sense. You mentioned a very interesting point where you said that, to get, you shifted to the US, right? When you decided as a company to start selling there because of the massiveness of the market opportunity and stuff. Now, this gets me to a very interesting question because this is something that a lot of founders, including me, have grappled with, right? And I've probably made my decisions, but I know that a lot of founders have come to me and told me also, right? Is that a necessity for at least one person from the founding team to shift to the market where you're selling, right? Let's say US. And does it differ if you are doing enterprise sales versus you're selling to SMB or mid-market?
Yeah. No, great. See, you've got to replicate the sales motions your sales reps will walk, right? Because you can't as a founder outsource the job of discovering how to market, sell, and deploy your product. That you can't outsource that. You have to do
Yes.
it yourself before you get the next person and say, hey, let's scale this. Why do I say that? So if you're running primarily an SMB focused business, right, then how do your sales reps prospect online? How do they sell online? How do they deploy online? How do they service online, right? Then your location doesn't matter. Now, it does matter in terms of, hey, if you're going after US, let's say you're going after Indian mom and pop stores, right? If you've never seen the inside of an Indian mom and pop store, you're probably going to build a really bad product, right? So from that respect, your awareness of the market is super important. Your presence, debatable, right? For example, I spent in the last week spent a lot of days with Krish, the founder of ChargeBee. So his market is global. Obviously, he has teams in India. He has a lot of people in the US, and he's in Amsterdam, right? And for him, the point is he's able to operationalize and rationalize his global operations in a central time zone, which works very, very well for him, right? So his presence necessarily in the US isn't that important, right? If you're running a mid-market or enterprise only business, wherein no matter what we say about remote work, work from home, hybrid, there is a huge element of being in front of the customers, being able to talk to them, being able to run pilots and things like that. Your presence in the local market is non-negotiable. That's what I feel, right? And mobility is very easy these days. It's not easy entirely, but it's easier than the past, right? So I would definitely strongly advocate for an enterprise, mid-market and enterprise business, for one of the founders to be in the market. They need to be in. It's not just for your customers, it's for the partners who will take you to market, right?
Makes
Because
sense.
large enterprise business run through partners. It could be technology alliances you want to make. It could be the kind of investors you seek, right? All of them may be in and around the market that you seek to serve. And I would definitely strongly advocate you being in the market as early as you can.
Awesome. I think this whole, subtle differentiation between, your presence in the market versus your awareness on the market, I think nobody has articulated it that well to me. So I think that's also a wonderful takeaway for me from this session. Great. Uh, Next question I had, Vinod, was, and again, this is a question that a few people had already asked us, because we
Mhm.
had asked for, solicited questions beforehand, was, when do you make your first hire in the US, right?
Yeah.
How do you decide?
So one of the great things about all the advice I'm giving you is that I did none of them. So unfortunately, all of these are lessons learned in hindsight. So I was very lucky. I hired a phenomenal sales leader who's today the CEO of a public company. So I'm very proud of that fact that my sales leader is today the CEO of a public company. But if I had to really run the chronology again, I would hire product marketing before sales. The reason is I moved mid-flight from India to the US, right? And the one thing you have to realize is when you move to a new market, you got to reestablish product market fit, which means
Yes.
your product's positioning in the market, relative positioning versus competition, right? Articulation of value prop, all of that changes entirely, right?
Entirely.
And we essentially winged it, right? We entirely winged it between, of course, I had great people then, right? One of my core founding team members was running marketing, but the fact was that we probably should have hired a product marketer in the US day one and spent the first few months truly understanding the market, running primary research, secondary research, understanding what our competitors are doing, right? Understanding what our people are searching for, and then go after it. The one thing we did have that we entirely drilled down on is the fact that the first US customer we got was inbound. And we asked them, look, how'd you find us? And obviously there was G2 crowd, there were other places. And they said, look, two things stood out for us. One was for what you're offering, the price point of some of your competition is like multiples, like 5, 6, 7, 8, like up, depending on what we're up to 10x. We were like surprised. And the second was none of those products are even 1/10 as configurable or usable by the end user as yours is. And we took these, and we had only that much data, right? And we took a gut call on the market that these are pain points. You can have the right gross margin and everything, and CAC and payback and all of that, without overcharging the customer, because your product generally doesn't need that much effort to be deployed, right? Any money you make out of that is purely opportunistic. So we narrowed in on that value prop and went ahead, but that was very coincidental. So I would absolutely hire product marketing first to help me discover the right positioning for my product before I go to sales. Far too often, and I'll point out one mistake that many founders make. I'm sure if we had a live audience, hand to heart, if I'd asked for a show of hands, half the hands would have gone up. Please don't make two mistakes. One is, hey, I'm in India. There's this guy, it's usually a guy, unfortunately, who has a Rolodex, and he says he will close X business for me in year one. And of course, you've got to pay him a larger base because he's giving up something large and coming. Before you know it, you're $1 million down, and I can guarantee you have no business, right? The second mistake, even bigger, is I'm here, we've got someone or some sales agency or some partner in Brazil. I'm not going to go to Brazil now, but this person is willing to come and do something for free. It doesn't cost me any money. So what's the harm? The harm is it's your mind space. The founder has only that much mind space. Your core team only has that much time. And any effort that is not helping you go towards product market fit in your core market of choice, that investment is probably a bad investment, be it time, be it money, be it whatever. So just avoid these very, 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 very easy traps that almost all founders fall into. And I would definitely choose to orient myself towards product market fit. It starts with maybe product marketing and discovery of what the market needs before sales.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to also touch upon was, and this is something that Abhishek from Extra Hedger asked, was, we talk about getting our first customer. Yes, if you get it inbound, nothing like it. But after you get a couple of customers, you realize, hey, you know what, this is the market that we want to build a product for life. And if it's a costly market like US, right? While it is a massive market, you can make a lot of money. It's also a costly market, right? How much should you at least have in the bank, or what kind of raise should you look at before you decide to pick any Western market like the US? Or is that even a criteria you should consider?
See, that's a multifaceted question, right? Because I'd hate to tell you that have X capital before you come to the US. At the same time, I'm like, I have not built a bootstrap business, so I'm probably the wrong person to advise on that front. But the fact is venture capital is abundantly available, right? Which means definitely having some money in the bank to give yourself 2 years of execution bandwidth. Yeah, right? It's good. And that's why I'm saying don't optimize for the wrong things, which is you don't need sales reps. You don't need sales reps on day one because you're trying to get your first 5 or 10 customers. The founder is the sales rep, right? Even if you're the technical founder, trust me, you'll have much more conviction about the problem and the solution than any hired sales rep can, right? So assuming you got to hire a couple of people in the US for product marketing and one other thing or whatever, right? Or you want to run a larger prospecting engine and you want to be the one who comes into the conversation and run everything else from India, assume 2 years of operating bandwidth, just because some experiments take time. You're supposed to get your first couple of experiments wrong, right? So I think so long as you have that execution bandwidth, I think you can definitely do that. The other one is, let's assume you already have some business in other parts. I know many great founders who've done services companies that have identified a pain point, then gone into product. And the services companies have actually funded the product companies. There is no wrong way to building a company, right? There is no wrong way to, if you're making money, if you're making more money than you spend, be proud of how you make that money, right? Be it services, don't get too enamored by what it's called, right? So you need to have some way to fund 2 years of operations, right? That's approximately there, because if you have 6 months, pressure is a great thing, but the law of diminishing returns kicks in after some time. If you don't have the right money in the bank, if you're personally struggling, if you're not able to make payroll, I've been there. I don't want to over romanticize the value of that, right? It teaches you great lessons. I would not have it any other way, but I would never want to be there again, right? So 2 years of operating bandwidth. So you can tweak and say, I've raised a very large round, I'll have 5 people. I have very little money, it'll be me plus 1. I have very, very, very little money, it's just me and nobody else. Everything is okay, but give yourself 2 years of operating bandwidth so you can discover what it takes to sell in the market.
Makes sense. We got a question from Vikas Kaushal. He asks, when you decide to set up a sales team in the region of your choice, who should you hire first? Should it be top down, so you hire a VP sales and then you have SDRs and sales managers, or should it be bottom up, where you have a sales manager and SDRs, and then once your sales starts accelerating, you get a VP sales.
This a different question came up, and Umesh, who's the founder of Unifor, someone I respect very much, and we were talking about, hey, should teams be geographically dispersed or whatever? And he started his answer by saying, hey, see, my answer to this question is changing as we go along, right? And which is the right mindset to have, right? There are no absolutes here. The reason I say that is, there are few variables you want to throw into the mix. One, are you a sales founder? Are you a tech founder? Let's say you've never been in front of a customer, right? I would still say you're the number one salesperson there. But the learning curve of what it takes to prospect, right? Just setting up one or two pieces of software that allow you to make better calls, or whatever, or write a better copy, you'll realize somebody else is better than you. So don't waste your time trying to figure things you're not great at, correct? So then you probably want to hire someone a little more mature, a little more senior, correct? To help show you the path. If you're a sales founder or you've been in sales long enough, right? For Umesh, for example, is an engineer, but he's the best sales rep for the product, right? Then it's okay to hire someone more junior, because you're like, man, I need to make 20 calls a day or write these emails, or you know what, I don't want to write these emails. Why don't you operate the system and send emails on my behalf, and the moment we get a response, I'll jump on it or whatever, right? Then you can hire someone junior. I built my teams top down. I hired the sales leader, I hired the marketing leader, and then I built teams downstream. I've always believed in that, but I'm not saying that is the right approach to make, but that's an expensive way to build these teams, right? But I will tell you one very important thing though. Now, bottom up, there's no question, but in top down, there is one very important thing that you have to do. If you're building teams top down, there are 2 or 3 things I would do. One, please don't hire somebody who's already in that role. So if you're hiring for a VP of sales, please don't hire a VP of sales. The reason I say that is this is the first hire. If someone's used to having a team to start to execute, which is they come in and they first need their 3 or 4 people and their admin, look, my EA has to come with me, huge red flag, right? We're talking pre-product market fit. You're not Series D, right? And Series D execs can come with their admins, right? Series A or pre-Series A, you can't do that. So the reason I say that is this, for this person, it should be an elevation to VP of sales, which means they know they've gotten the title, but they've not earned it yet, which means they roll up their sleeves, they make the first few calls, right? They close the first set of business, and they show you and the team that they're going to hire next how it is done. If you're getting someone who's going to be a leader, team leader on day one, you've already hired wrongly, right? This came up when one of my board members, she was in the very early team at Salesforce. So Rajni was on my board, and I was saying, hey, we're hiring this very tenured sales leader. And I was sheepish about asking him for a demo. She says, look, don't ever hire a salesperson till they've demoed. I don't care if they spent 30 years selling and they were the first salesperson on the continent. So the point is, if you ask a VP of sales, I would love for you to run a sales demo, either my product or whatever you're selling today. I want to see how you do. And they balk at that idea, again, red flag, right? Yes. So this, nobody will not say, I won't roll up my sleeves. But the way you validate that is awesome. Let's do one thing. Let's mock. Please write me a prospecting mail for your product. I will respond to it. Schedule time with me. They might think this is what an SDR does, okay? But your first person has to do that. That's exactly what you're going to do, right? Write a prospecting email, hope to get their attention, engage them, try to get time, right? Run an actual demo or a discovery call, whatever you call it, right? There's a process to it, and you want them to do it. So the thing I would do is have them hands-on, interview them for hands-on stuff, obviously interview them for how they'll build the team and things like that, and get them to operate in solo mode for a sufficient period of time that tells you that they've earned their stripes and now they can hire a team. Do not let them come in and hire 6 people on day one, because one of the things you'll realize 2 years into that hire is that you'll walk into a sales conversation and realize that they are not a good salesperson for your product, right? They don't articulate the value prop well enough. They've given you dashboards, they've given you Salesforce, they've given you reports, they've given you all of these things, but put them alone in front of a customer and ask them to pitch. You as a founder will cringe, because you'll say there's no conviction in that sales pitch. And I've seen that with it happened to me. I've seen that happen to friends of mine. Never ever get into that trap.
Makes sense. In fact, I just want to add a small anecdote. I got reminded of that. Exact same advice I was given by another entrepreneur who's bridged the India-US product divide. And he told me a very interesting thing. So I was actually struggling with my GTM back then. And I said, how do I do this? So he said, don't do anything. You should actually go to LinkedIn and put a post that you're
Mm.
hiring for a VP sales or a president of sales, right? And hype up your company like anything, right?
Mm.
On LinkedIn, ask your people to share, ask your investors to share so that, there is enough buzz created. And then you will have, people applying, right? So, and if there is a big company which is in the same domain as yours, figure out, people who are basically director of sales or assistant director of sales in those companies, because they have the hunger to actually move up, right? So if they are being given a designation in your company as VP sales, then they have already got their hands dirty and rolled up their sleeves. They have to do that in the initial 1 year, right, to kind of justify the position that they have been given, and interview these people. Even if you don't finally end up hiring them, you'll get to know what they did, to
Absolutely.
crack the GTM. And that's why the company is big today. So you will at least get the code. So it just resonates well with what you've been saying. The next question is from, sorry, go ahead.
No, that is great advice. I completely agree with that.
Harshvardhan Mishra asks, how do you gain trust as a new guy in the US market? Because it's a very, social kind of a place, right? And it's a trust heavy market.
Mm.
uh, I also experienced this because while they are ready to pay you on day one, right? It's a high trust market. If you don't deliver, then they just snap back, right? Unlike India, where it's like, hey, even if you don't deliver, people are tolerant, right? But in the US, I think they'll pay you from day one and they'll pay you a huge premium. But if something actually goes, bust, then I think you are done for, right? So how do you gain trust in this kind of a market? Harshvardhan's question.
So Harsh, first thing, the good and bad news is delivery comes after sales. So let's first focus on selling, right? And then we focus on the delivery, right? So one of the things you got to realize in the US is that there is a serious amount of objectivity around buying and selling. What do I mean by that? Uh, I'm fairly certain you can't do this in India, but you can do this in the US, wherein I'm talking to Srinivas and I'm saying, hey, are you the decision maker? It seems like an offensive question, right? Like, do you have the authority to buy this product? The US, you can ask. And that person will say, no, I'm the director. The decision, the budget is owned by the VP of X, and I need to go back to them. Awesome. So you're the key sort of influence over. Yes, I'm the one who will run the product. So, I need to be convinced before we can go there. So, who's the decision maker, who you're talking to, right? That is one. Second, hey, do you have the budget? Is it budgeted for? Is it imminent? Do you want to do this quarter? They will literally tell you, yes, we have a budget for it and we need to spend it by July because our next budgeting cycle starts. So you can ask very objective questions that you otherwise die guessing, right? In other markets, especially in India, you can very directly ask off of these people. Why am I telling you this? When you can ask these questions objectively, they assume that what you're positioning, what you're selling is accurate. Fake it till you make it is something you apply with great discretion to your business. Okay. You don't fake product till you make it, right? I'm not saying all the bells and whistles are done, right? So one good thing is a lot of early products, let's say if you're backed by, you need some point of validation. And I'll give you 2 or 3 points of validation that you can go to. I'm pitching to John Doe at some company, and I'm like trying to tell them, hey, take my product. The first point of validation is brand new product but backed by incredible investors, right? So let's assume, let's take a blue chip name, not to say others are not. You have a Sequoia or an Axel on your cap table and you're like, this is great, look, some of the best investors in the world have backed me to solve a problem. That is a point of validation. Second, who are you, right? And this is not the chronological order, it could be any particular order. I have spent many years in FMCG or CPG or whatever you call it, right? Or in finance, right? I've done this, I've seen this problem. Now the other person says, yes, you know my world, right? You know my world, you know what problem exists in insurance distribution or in this or whatever, right? That's validation, right? Third is irrespective of one or two is your own passion for the problem. Why do you want to solve it, right? You may not be from the industry or whatever, right? The fourth is authenticity. As I said, very, very important. You can tell them you're my first customer and it's fine, okay? Until I know you're taking a leap of faith. That's why, in the bell curve of adoption, you're going after a different persona of customers, right? If you have a customer, whether alpha, beta, pilot, whatever, right? and they're willing to come on record, please have a customer validation. Hey, I've solved for one customer, but I've solved it really well. So don't fake things that are absolutes, which is how many customers do you have? How many times have you done this? And things like that, or what your product does. Do not overcome it. Do not overpromise, right? Tell them, I solved one problem really, really well. I hope to solve these adjacent problems too, but I'm here to do one thing for you. Solve that knee pain of yours, not your entire body, right? And I think that is very important because that is the premise they will buy. That is the premise you will go to deploy. And if that premise is wrongly established, you obviously will fail in your delivery, right? And then all of what you just said holds good, right? They will not give you a second chance. In fact, they will judge you for being inauthentic. And I remember once I got ahead of myself. I was in a one-on-one with someone in a very, very large company. And he said, look, I really like you, but I want to tell you something. I said, yeah, sure. He said, look, some of these claims will get people to lose trust really, really fast, right? So I love what you're saying. I believe you do everything you do. It still sounds too good to be true. Why don't you scale it down a little? And this is very friendly advice in a very non-hostile environment, right? That he chose to give me. Most people won't give it to you. They'll just sit back and say, it just seems too good to be true. So please avoid that trap. Be authentic. I'm not saying, say, you go out and say, I have no customers, know this, know that, right? There is something about you that makes you the right person to solve this problem. Make sure that conviction comes out with authenticity. It could be 5 beta customers, it could be the right investors, it could be you having spent 20 years in the industry, or your ability to articulate the pain point of the customer to a level wherein he or she feels that this is a replica of me. That is great. Do not fake it to an extent where you lose credibility. Once you lose credibility, you won't even be able to make that sale.
Makes sense. The one thing that I really wanted to discuss with you, again, this has been frequently asked, so I thought it should be covered, is, let's say you move to a market where you've decided to sell your product for life, right? And you're building a team there, but you do have your team in your home country, right? And for want of a real life example, we have multiple examples of B2B SaaS companies that have their tech and product teams in India, but their sales teams are basically based out of the US, right? And at least one founder is based out of the US. I have, and I think, this is just not me, I'm speaking on behalf of many founders, especially the India US time zone thing is super brutal.
Yeah.
Right? It just kills you. How do you manage to balance this out? Because you have to sell, so you can't leave that market, you have to be physically present there. B, you can't ignore your one half of the team that is sitting in India, because if you ignore them for long, then obviously attrition comes in, right? Anything that you think has worked for you, because the time zones really kill you. So I just thought I should ask this question, because this has been something that has been asked many times, and something that we also as founders have discussed. I don't think we really have a panacea to that problem. So
Yeah, so I'll tell you, no matter what you do, a few things are going to happen. Okay, few things that are going to happen is your India team. Let's say you've been in India 2-3 years and then you move to the US, right? Your India team will feel left out. Okay, that hey, we were here, we were together, we joined when there were 3 people in the company, we were there when salaries were not being paid, right? And now you've gone and you've forgotten us. It will happen. Okay. The second thing that will happen is the US team will think the India team knows nothing, and vice versa. Okay, that will happen. All right. If it happens, it's neither the India team's fault or the US team's fault. This is where you own up as a founder and know that it is your problem, right? Either you created it, or you didn't solve it fast enough, or you're not doing anything to solving it. So I felt the same. I experienced the same. So the first few things are very important. First of all, when a founder moves, the founder has to know who is the owner of culture in the company that you're still leaving behind. Usually it's a co-founder, right? You need someone co-founder-esque at least to be walking the hallways in India, because these are the people who helped you build the company. Never forget that, right? Nobody cares about the company more than they do. So you need to invest in making sure, one, you remain engaged. Earlier, you used to walk the hallways, right? You used to talk to people informally over a tea or whatever, right? Make sure you do enough skip levels, this, that, everything, so people believe. Everyone has to understand that some things will change, right? As the company scales, but your commitment to skip levels, visiting India often enough, walking the hall, doing the same things, super important. You have to demonstrate it, okay? One thing when I realized that my US India teams were drifting apart is one day I just decided I took my entire US team, flew them to India 1 week for an offsite, right, with both the teams. By the end of that trip, I realized that people understood each other so well and had such a nice personal bonding. We did a lot of fun activities, right? Very little time spent on business and focus and alignment and this and that. We did spend some time, but a lot of that was for people to get to know each other. When the teams came back, they understood the other person's POV. There was a face to the name. They understood that they work really hard, right? And vice versa. And then there was a much better understanding for the other person's POV. So I invested in them spending enough time physically. But the thing you got to avoid is a few traps. One, invariably, when you move to the US, the India team ends up working nights, 6 days a week. Okay, please avoid that. So, for example, I remember, I won't mention which entity. Friday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific was engineering review. And then I said, hey guys, do you know what time that is in India? That's 8:30 p.m. on a Friday. Nobody in the United States works 8:30 p.m. on a Friday. Nobody, right? Period. Why is it okay for India teams on their weekend to, at 8:30 p.m. go into an engineering review? That is unacceptable, right? So each team has to realize, if let's say twice a week you're doing, unless if it's an emergency, right? One team sort of takes the order, right? So it's equitably distributed, maybe not equally, but equitably, right? US teams typically tend to start earlier in the morning, right? India teams typically tend to start later in the morning. So if you want to pick an early morning time here, early evening time there, that's also okay. Give any Indian developer 7 p.m. versus a 7 a.m. Call time. I think 99.9% will pick 7 p.m. over 7 a.m. Right?
Yes.
So
I can
those are
vouch for
something.
that personally. Yeah.
There you go, right? But I think the most important thing is, are you conscious? Do you believe this is a problem? Do you consciously want to address it, right? And you have to be at the vanguard of addressing this problem, right? It is procedural, it is about time, it is about culture, it is about how close you feel to the business. And no amount of effort and investment in bridging this divide is too much. So please stay at it.
Got it. Very valuable advice. Rajesh Gopal asks, what are the cultural differences that you have to consider while selling in India versus selling in US or any other market?
I think India is much, so this is true everywhere, but India is much more people to people driven, right? That is also true in the US, make no mistake, right? Much more, but the US also believes that like many things are about process and this and that. So I'll give an example. In India, the agreement you sign with your customer is broad general guidance. It's like red lights in India, which is, it's red, but it means if there's nobody around, you can still go, right? In the US, a red light is a red light, right? Which means the agreements you sign, the contracts you sign, the dates you give, the times you give, the commitments you make, the deliverables you commit are all absolute, right? It is assumed that also is backed by enforceability of contracts. Please understand, in India, enforceability of contracts is, up for interpretation. The US, it is absolute, right? US, no customer will come up to you and tell you, hey, this is all cool, but can we start billing 3 months later, because something changed. I've heard that at least a dozen times myself in India, right? So it's not good or bad. It is what it is, right? That's the market. People have built their fortunes in either market. So the nuances you got to be aware of is, in the US, you can do much more straight talk. You can ask, hey, are you the decision maker? What's your budget? India, you may not be able to do it, right? What you commit is absolute. If their commitment to paying you is absolute, your commitment on what you're delivering is also absolute. So be acutely aware and conscious of that fact, right? The need for human connection is true in both places. India is probably a little higher, right? But the good in the US is, you will not be drawn into services that extend beyond the scope of what you signed in the contract, right? Whereas in India, you could be pulled down that path pretty easy, right? Which is, hey, this can also be done. Why don't you also do this or whatever? So these are some of the nuances. I also think that we, barring some markets, which may still be whatever, but in most cases, most enterprises have a fairly international workforce in the US, which means you should be less concerned about not looking local or sounding local, unless, of course, you're handling data, regulated information, PII, and things like that. That's a different thing. But in general, you should not feel too encumbered by the fact that you're not local. It is okay. Software is universal, right? So be less constrained by those factors. you'll find that the US is actually a very, very welcoming market for almost anybody selling from anywhere.
Got it. Actually, Rajesh just followed it up with a question saying what he meant was cultural differences, specifically in prospecting users in India versus prospecting users in the US or any other market.
Yeah, so prospecting is very interesting. Okay, so I have this very simple example, and I'll try to mimic it, hopefully without looking like a fool. So let's say you're prospecting on the phone. Okay, how do we get on the phone? One of the things you'll notice is the difference between a really good SDR, India or US, and someone who's not. Is in the US, the conversations start on a high. So when I pick up the phone, my hello is not tentative. It's like, hey, Srinivasan, how's it going? Like whatever, right? It's almost like we know each other. And 2 minutes in, you're like, do they know each other? Like, how did this conversation between strangers start on high volume, high energy, right? In our case, please listen in to go back to your call recording and listen to his first hello, and then yes, is this Srinivasan? And now the guy's saying, geez, like, is this a collection call or is this someone trying to sell me something I don't need? And that I call those white spaces. The conversation has a lot of white spaces and a lot of low energy phases, which makes us traditionally very bad prospectors, right? We are really, really bad prospectors when it comes to that. We don't start our calls high energy, right? Why am I telling you this small cultural nuance? It makes or breaks your conversation, right? Now, the moment it's slow and the person like, okay, who's it? What do you want? Now you start talking in our English, which is fast. The words start to merge with each other, and now the person like, sorry, what do you just say? I mean, like, this makes no sense. And now you're like, geez, the guy can't understand me, so let me start again, right? Now let me slow down. And now the person like, why is this person talking like I'm a second grader, and your conversation is done, right? We are really bad at phone prospecting. Okay, even the way we write our text is usually pretty cumbersome. So one place I think the cultural nuance that will be helpful is, if you are one of the great things about the US is whenever two people meet. I was in at the Pantheon in Rome. It's the world's oldest, I think, still in use building or whatever, 2000 years later. So two folks cross each other. One guy sees a T-shirt on the other, and I didn't notice what they did, and they didn't know each other. They're both American, of course. And so the guy looks at him and says, hey, whatever state, whatever school, and then he knew the master. He said, go Hawks, or whatever, right? And then these guys have a laugh and they talk and they keep walking, right? So if you're prospecting in the state of Georgia, right, you better know the local sport. You better know, like, it's the minimum investment you can make to show that you care, right, that you're involved. If you're calling the day after the Super Bowl, okay, and you're unaware of the fact that the Super Bowl happened yesterday, and that's not part of your first 30, 60 seconds, I'm sorry, like, then you don't care enough about your target audience, right, to want to sell to them. So one great thing is you can relate to almost anybody in the US depending on what school they went to, right, what state they live in, what sport they follow. And a lot of this research is super easy. It's not the hardest thing in the world, right? So please do that research, and that cultural nuance, I will tell you, will hold you in great stead no matter how you prospect. Don't write long winding emails. Write to the point, say go Hawks, go Raptors, whatever, right? And start a human conversation before you start a prospecting conversation. The need for that is acute in the US more than any other market that I've known. Does that help? I mean, feel free to ask a follow-on question. There's other cultural nuances you want to talk about, because this can be the cultural nuances of prospecting can be a 1-hour webinar for sure.
Yeah. Maybe that's the next topic that we should delve upon next month. But yeah. So I'll just end with a couple of questions. One is we have just a few minutes left. In these difficult times, do you foresee US customers making huge cuts in their budgets for SaaS tools? How should founders in India respond? And a follow-up question or an addendum to that is, do you still believe US is the massive market that it used to be?
Second answer, undoubtedly yes. That is one. Remember, when you look at Europe, each country has 3 languages, right? You go to the south of Belgium, only speak French. North is only Flemish. You go to Switzerland, there's a German speaking, French speaking. Please understand, each country is divided. US, you speak English no matter where you go, right? So it's very, very important to understand how large that market is. So answer is yes. Second, in terms of cuts, 100%. The economy, everyone's economy is contracting. Inflation is a real thing. The mortgage rates are so high that most people today have come to a point they can't buy a house. It is unfathomable that it doesn't affect car sales and home sales and this and that, everything, correct? So the answer is yes. So the acute need is for you to focus on ROI. Like, remember, hand to heart, half of you will talk about the ROI your product delivers and know that it's still wishy-washy, right? Your ROI has to be absolute. So when going back to my market simplified days, hey, I will help you place a trade that earns you $15. Can you give me $1, right? Boom, yes. Help me make $15, I'll give you $1, okay? It cannot be wishy-washy. So you really need to get very hardcore about the money you make, the money you save, right? Without which it will be super hard. And know that even good products, your buyers will come back and say, can you shave off a little, because I've been given a 10% budget reduction goal and I need to go to even my best products and shave it off. So undoubtedly that is going to happen.
Got it. We have just 1 minute left, and this is the favorite section of mine. I compiled it yesterday after a lot of thought. It's a rapid fire section, Vinod. So you need to, kind of give me the answer within the next within 5 seconds of me finishing the question.
Okay.
So should we start?
Let's do it.
If you had to, if you had to repeat your Cloudcherry journey today, what is that one thing you would do differently?
No passengers on the cap table. Unfortunately, we capitalize a company really badly. Nobody other than people who are operating and dedicating their time to the company deserve disproportionate equity.
Makes sense. Biggest one advice to founders selling into the US from India?
Product market fit, market product fit, know your market. If you cannot articulate the pain point as good or better than your ICP, you're in the wrong business.
If you had to pick one demographic market in the world to sell to, which would that be? US.
Depth, the transparency in the market, and the budgets that exist. There is no market like the US.
What are you reading right now?
I always read 5 to 6 books at the same time and reread. So Bill Bryson, favorite author, there's 2 books I'm reading. One is called The Mother Tongue, How English Became What It Became. I'm reading The Body, which is just an incredible book. I could talk about that for 1 hour. I'm rereading Range by Jeffrey Epstein because it mirrors my own life journey. I'm treating about the hard things as a reference guide. I just pick a page and I go in on certain topics. And on Audible, I'm listening to Autobiography of a Yogi, which was gifted to me by our Chief People Officer.
Awesome. I think that's a wonderful way to end this conversation. And I'm so happy that A, we did it live, and B, more importantly, we will have it on our YouTube channel, because I think some of the pearls of wisdom that you spoke and you shared with us, I think those are timeless, right? And I know that members of my team, and a lot of people who have been listening in would want to go back again and again and listen to majority of the portions of this talk. It has been absolutely, kind of enlightening and illuminating. Thank you very much, Vinod, from the bottom of my heart and from everyone on behalf of Good Meetings for taking time out. Truly appreciate it. Wonderful way to kickstart this series. Thanks a lot.
Hey, 30-second message, guys. Please give feedback. Feedback is the essence of improvement.
Yes.
Good, bad, ugly. Good
Doesn't
feedback
matter.
in public, bad feedback in person. So that's the only request. Please add to what has been told. Please disagree to with what has been told. Feel free to edit and say, hey, in my learning, I learned this. I want to learn, right? I stopped being a founder 2.5 years ago. So there's a learning curve in front of me too. So please offer feedback. LinkedIn, direct, mail Srinivasan, whatever you want to do, right? But please do that.
Oh, thanks a lot for actually calling that out, Vinod. Yes, absolutely. I think without feedback, this whole loop will not be complete. Any kind of feedback, as Vinod said, good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. It only helps Vinod improve. It helps me improve. It helps our company improve. Please, keep them coming, and that will only help us, improve this initiative further. Thanks a ton, Vinod. And until next time, farewell, guys. Hope to see you very soon. Bye.
Cheers, folks. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.